I'm Andreas Solberg from NorduNet. I will use this OAuth and OpenID Connect service provider to demonstrate Dataporten and some of the capabilities. So this service is called play.oauth.no and is a OAuth and OpenID Connect client that runs in your browser. So you will be able to inspect and see some of the under the hood of the OAuth and OpenID Connect protocol. We start by discovering Dataporten using OpenID Connect Discovery. We will now have all the needed configuration in order to interop with Dataporten, but we also would need to register a new application at Dataporten. To do that, we use Dataporten Dashboard, which is the self-service interface for developers. We register a new application. We paste in the redirect URI where we will be sent back with the token. We give the application a name and a description and accept the terms of use. To get the client ID back into the application or the client, try to authenticate the end user to this service. We are now sent to the authorization endpoint of NorduNet, of Dataporten. We will select NorduNet. I have a session already at FIDE, and will be asked for consent to access this service provided by me as a developer. It asks for user ID, name, and profile image. And we see here that we got the access token back. We can now use this access token to access a user info endpoint that is OAuth protected at Dataporten. Now let's go over to configure some more permissions to this client. We will add the permission to get the email address to access the groups API. We will provide a long-term token and maybe the FIDE user IDs. We move back and request a new token to Dataporten. We now see the account chooser where it remembers my account. I would like to log in using the same account, but I'm asked again for a new consent because I have now requested some additional permissions, like we mentioned, groups, FIDE ID, email address, etc. We accept this, and we are now back with a new token with more scopes than earlier. We cannot do a new request to the user info endpoint. We can see that we also now have the profile photo, email, user IDs, etc. And there is a separate endpoint for accessing the Dataporten Groups API. We can now request a list of groups that I, as an end user, is member of. Okay, so now we've seen using the user info endpoint and the Groups API, but there is also a possibility for developers to register APIs, third-party APIs, to be exposed to Dataporten clients. And we'll try to demonstrate that. To move forward, we need to implement an API, and we can use the http://js.net demo service to mock up a simple API to use with Dataporten. So what we can do here is to load a template that actually helps us to do the access control part, the trust relationship between Dataporten and the API, and also it will implement a simple dice game for responding back to the client. The entire implementation of the API runs in the browser, and you can modify it, and you can also review the messages that it receives and responds with. As you see on the top, we need to configure it with trust with Dataporten API Gatekeeper. So let's move over to dashboard and register a new API Gatekeeper. We call it dice game 10. And now we need to enter the real URI where the API runs. We have already been delegated this specific domain name for our API. We accept the terms of use and register the API. Now we can set up the permissions of what kind of subscopes and access levels that we would like to expose to the clients. We'll keep it simple for now and just run with the basic scope. But there is possibility of adding more restricted parts of the API that you can accept for only a subset of your clients. We will also we can also here configure the specific permissions that the API is able to perform on behalf of the user accessing the API. Here is the trust that is established between Dataporten API Gatekeeper and the real API. Now I would like to actually test using the API. So we move over to our existing demo client that we have running over here, and we go into third-party APIs. That a cool dice game is available. We request access to this API, which is granted. We can now use an OpenID Connect implicit flow in contrast to using OAuth to demonstrate that as well. We wipe the existing token and do request a new one. We use the same account. We can see that we would be requested for consent to also allow the client to access the cool dice game. And we can see now that the client got a new access token, including this new dice game, but it also got back an ID token, which is part of the OpenID Connect specification. Here is also a decoded version of the ID token that we received. Okay, now we can try to use the same access token that we got during the authorization part and access our new dice game API. We see that we got a separate host name that proxies our API requests and forward it to the API. Here we got the response back. We sent a simple GET request and got back some JSON. We can move over to the HTTPS.js service and see that this was the incoming request. We can see that the access token from the client was removed and replaced with the authorization trust header that connects the API gatekeeper with the API. We can see that the Dataporten gatekeeper also added the client ID, the name of the gatekeeper, the user ID, user IDs of the end user, and we even got a delegated access token that API can use to further request information on behalf of the user. Thank you for watching.